Welcome to JK Tells a Story, where real-life dramas unfold. Sit back and enjoy today's tale. There are days when life is hard and you want to yell at everyone around you. You know the kind of days I'm talking about. You open your eyes suddenly realizing you're running late because you hit the snooze button too many times. You rush out the door and the rest of your day becomes an uphill struggle. My day started out that way, and by the end it got worse. Much worse. Catherine and I had been married for just under 5 years. We met through friends at a barbecue in German Village and hit it off right away. As I learned from Catherine and her friends, she was going through a rough breakup with her longtime boyfriend. I was a pretty good-looking single guy who they thought might be good for her. I was wary at first. I didn't want to be the rebound guy. However, over the course of a few months, our mutual friends kept bringing us together and we developed a friendship. 6 months later, I plucked up the courage to ask her out, and a little over 2 years after we met, I asked Catherine to be my wife. At the time, I was thrilled that she agreed, and until tonight, I felt like I could sell the air Catherine breathed because I loved her so much. Michael, Catherine asked me as I was polishing my shoes for our going out tonight, should I choose black or beige-heeled shoes tonight? This is me, Michael Harrison, a generally nice guy, a hardworking accountant with his own practice here in Columbus, and right now I feel like the biggest sucker the world has ever seen. You look good in both, I told her, but the black-heeled shoes emphasize your calves much more. They'll draw more attention. Catherine loved to dress up and looked good when she did it right, but she usually had a poor fashion sense. She just didn't know how to combine colors, styles, and shapes. That was one of the things I liked about her. She was always asking my advice, and it was up to me to make her look good. Aside from the late start to the day, it was a busy day at the office. We were doing some audits for a large multinational corporation. There were delays and incorrect information coming in. Mostly they were innocent errors, but the last few spreadsheets we audited looked wrong. My team and I spent an entire day reviewing the data and comparing ledgers. We were annoyed by some of the weird and wonderful things the managers were trying to convey to us. These included going to adult entertainment venues and in some cases inappropriate services. We also encountered people trying to get people to sign for controlled substances as a legitimate business expense. Going through this audit and on this particular Friday there were a lot of spreadsheet issues. I was tired and frustrated. To make matters worse, Catherine had been happy and bubbly all week, gushing about today's reunion. It annoyed me that throughout the week she had paid no attention to my fatigue. In the past, if I had a rough week like this one, Catherine would take the time to listen to me, sympathize with me, and usually show a little affection to lift my spirits. But this week she was so focused on the reunion event that I felt uncomfortable for the first time since we'd known each other. I can't say I liked that feeling, but she was my wife, and if she was happy about something, I tried to be happy for her regardless of how I felt myself. Tonight was her high school reunion. It wasn't a formal event organized by the school, but rather something arranged by a few people from the class. They had rented a restaurant and then a private area in the club for the alumni and their partners. Last year I went with Catherine, and I have to admit I got a few strange looks at me after introducing me as Catherine's husband, but I had a good time. This year I wasn't really looking forward to it. Like I said, it was a lousy week. But with my wife's enthusiasm and as a potential escape from a difficult audit week, I showered and shaved without complaint, put on my best suit, did my hair and labored to shake off the week to be my wife's happy helper. From the moment we arrived at the restaurant, I sensed something was wrong. Catherine was immediately dragged away by several girls from her class, and I was left standing practically alone. At dinner, we were seated with our friends Jessica and Robert, who had introduced us, and I took almost no part in the conversation, only occasionally asking questions. Catherine continued to act like a happy, simpering person, but I noticed that she rarely spoke to me, and many people, including Jessica and Robert, kept throwing glances at me that couldn't be called comforting. As dinner was coming to an end, Jessica and Catherine disappeared into the bathroom, and they were gone for quite some time. At the same time, everyone was breaking up to head to the club for a few more drinks and dancing. "What's going on, Rob?" I asked my friend cautiously, approaching him when Catherine and Jessica didn't return after a while. Sorry, Mike. Robert flinched slightly as I rubbed him on the shoulder. I'm not quite sure what you mean. I threw him an incredulous look. Rob, I swear. I stopped when I saw Jessica coming back, but my wife wasn't with her. She grabbed her husband's hand, trying to avoid my gaze. Come on, Robert, Jessica said. Where's Catherine? I asked, a note of concern in my voice. She froze for a moment, then looked at Robert. A look passed between them. Then she looked at the artificial indoor plants around the restaurant for a moment. I could see her trying to figure out how to tell me what she didn't want to say. Sorry, Michael. She caught up with some old friends and she's on her way to the club with them. Without telling me, her husband? I asked, a note of anger in my voice. Jessica, Robert, what aren't you telling me? Neither of them met my gaze. Damn. Without another word, I jumped out of the restaurant, got in my car and drove to the club where everyone was meeting. The drive was 10 minutes, but I made it in 5. As I walked through the door, I saw her. My wife Catherine was dancing with some guy, and the way she was snuggling up to him told me it wasn't the first time this had happened. I watched my life drain out of me. People from the reunion crowded around me. No one said anything, but I could feel their pitying looks on me as I stood at the entrance to the club. I don't know how long I stood there watching them, but they didn't notice me as they danced. I stood there until I felt a hand touch my shoulder. The touch startled me, and I turned so suddenly I almost punched Jessica in the face. This is Catherine's first love, Tyler, Jessica said, and I couldn't tell if she was happy, sad, angry, or disappointed. They practically grew up together, went to the same kindergarten, were best friends in elementary school, and dated all the way through high school. We all thought they would be together forever until he got a scholarship to a university out east and they broke up. Now I knew the bastard's name, knew a lot of his background. Hell, I'd helped Catherine get over the rejection she'd felt when he'd left. They don't look too shattered to me, I muttered. He's been back for a few months now, transferred to the company he works for. Jessica informed me without emotion. I turned around to the dance floor. Catherine and Tyler were still dancing. Jessica kept talking and looking at them, and Robert was standing behind the two of us. They're meant to be together, Mike. There was emotion in her voice for the first time, like she was a doctor informing me that I had terminal cancer. I didn't say anything back. I mean, Catherine was so devastated when they broke up. She loved him so much. We never thought she'd meet anyone else. But then you came along and everything came together. Jessica tried to explain, and my fists started to clench. As the song stopped, we watched as Tyler leaned over and wrapped his arms around my wife's face and kissed her. My fingernails dug into my palm and blood flowed from it. When the first drop of blood fell from my palm to the ground, I thought the spell between them had broken. Catherine looked around at the people entering the club and met my gaze. With hands clasped together, she separated from Tyler and made her way toward me. I hadn't noticed Robert and Jessica leave. She approached me as if there was no history between us. Tyler was my first love, Mike. We gave each other our virginity. Catherine told me this without any greeting. She just cut to the chase. I stood as still as a statue. When he moved away to get his scholarship, we always said we'd love each other forever, she continued, looking me in the eye. I tried to move on, tried to love you the way you deserve to be loved. But I realize now that what Tyler and I have is something special, something I can't give up again. So what are you telling me, Catherine? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. You married me, I exclaimed. I'll give her points for courage. She didn't look away once. I'm sorry, Mike. I really am, but we're gonna have to get a divorce. I mean, Tyler and we're gonna get married and have kids and… What the hell have I been? Just your warm spot for the last few years. I was about to yell. A few people around us were staring at us and the bouncers were looking at us but not moving. I did, however, notice Tyler making his way towards us. Mike, you've never been. She stopped. Look, Mike, I love you. It's just that you're not Tyler. And our love is nothing compared to what Tyler and I have. I watched as Tyler took the last dozen steps toward us and put his arm around Catherine, a frown on his face. I take it you're Mike? He asked with a fake note of concern on his face. That's Michael to you, bastard, I replied angrily. He nodded. Okay, hostility. I get it, he said. You're upset because I'm taking your wife. She's going to divorce you and we've been sleeping together since I got back. He paused, and the look on my face showed I wasn't guessing anything. Catherine went white as a sheet when he said it. She must have hoped it wouldn't come out. Tyler didn't know me, so as soon as he realized what he'd said, he pushed Catherine behind him, adopting a defensive posture. Look, Michael, he said, trying to sound conciliatory. I'm sorry you found out this way, but maybe it's for the best. Catherine tells me you've been a great husband, the friend I couldn't be while I was away. It would be nice if we could all be friends since we have several groups of friends in common. Not for long, I said, holding my gaze on Catherine for a moment and looked at Tyler again. He turned pale and wanted to say something, so I spoke before he could respond. So let me get this right, I said, removing all emotion from my voice. My anger was growing by the moment, but I kept it contained for now. Surprisingly, at that moment the music stopped and my voice could be heard throughout the room. Apparently this little show had gotten everyone's attention because everyone turned to look at us, even the DJ who never started the next song. You two believe you have true love, have fun, and then break up because Tyler moves to another country. But while Catherine mourns her grief, she meets me, supposedly falls in love and marries me, and we're happy for a few years. They nod wearily, and you can hear a pin drop. Then true love flares up again when Romeo returns to the country, and you two start having fun behind my back again. Obviously all of our friends know about it, judging by the looks I've been getting all night tonight, and it all culminates in a conversation about my supposed best friend ripping my heart out and holding it high in the air for everyone here to see in one of the most humiliating ways possible. Mike, it wasn't supposed to be, Catherine started to say. It wasn't supposed to be like what? I yelled back, but no one moved. All week you've been jumping around but ignoring me despite my rough week. You demanded that we both attend tonight and then you ditched me as soon as we walked in the door. You disrespected me in front of our supposed friends and even left the restaurant without talking to me, so I'd catch you here. Hey! Tried to say Tyler, but I stared at him. Don't say a word, Romeo, I growled. Your true love has shown she's an unfaithful woman. You say you've been having fun for the last 3 months because you're one of the true romantics. Back off. Look, Mike, Tyler said, trying to get the conversation under control. I realize there's a lot of emotion around right now, but Catherine and I are meant to be together. We're sorry you got hurt and found out we slept together. But Catherine loves me and we're going to get married. Naturally, you and she will have to divorce, I replied indifferently. Look, Mike, Catherine said, I'm sorry, but we've decided that's the best way out. It'll be a quick rip of the Band-Aid. We know it'll hurt, but it's best for everyone. She paused, trying to gauge my mood. She may have been my wife and best friend for the past few years, but I'd always been open to her. She'd never considered me a closed book. Catherine, it's Michael, not Mike, I replied. She gulped. Look, Michael, she said. I know you're hurting right now, but it's for the best. We're still young. You'll find someone else. My eye twitched, and that small display of emotion made her pale even more. There was still no sound coming from the room. Tyler must have noticed because he cleared his throat. Look, Michael, I realize this isn't easy for you, but I think it's best for you to leave. Everyone here knows that Catherine and I are supposed to be together, and I unfortunately think you're going to be the third wheel. I smiled, and this time half the room looked at me questioningly. On that we agree, he smiled back, thinking I might understand. Okay, now that it's out in the open, Catherine and I will stay away from your house this weekend and even next week so you can move out. Move out? I asked, tilting my head to the side. Tyler gulped. Well, it's Catherine's house. I see, I said, narrowing my eyes. Michael, my soon-to-be ex-wife said, having a hard time transitioning to using my full name after such a long hiatus. We thought it would be easier for you to move. The house is perfect for Tyler and I to have kids, and we decided it was too big for you, so we'll figure something out. I see, I repeated to myself, with the last syllable sounding like a snake hissing. No one said anything for a while, and the silence stretched on until the DJ decided it was time to turn up the music since there was no fight in sight. When the music started, no one started dancing. Everyone in the room continued to watch to see what would happen. Tyler spoke loudly. I'm sorry, Michael, but this is the situation. I know you may not think so now, but don't take offense. He held out his hand. I looked at his hand, then back into his eyes, and that look made him quickly pull his hand away. If he could have looked into my mind, he would have seen me chopping off that hand with the nearest sharp object and then shoving the severed limb somewhere unpleasant. Deciding it was time to leave, I turned and walked out. No one stopped me. The two bouncers at the doors opened them and stepped out in front of me. When the doors closed and the noise from inside died down, one of them asked, "Are you okay?" They too had witnessed what had happened. No, not really, but I think anyone who just got screwed over would understand, I said. You know, the other bouncer said, if you wanted to go back and give that jerk a couple punches, we could have waited a few minutes before pulling you out. For the first time all day, I laughed. Both bouncers smirked. While that's tempting, no. I don't need a night in the county jail. Both nodded. Still, the first bouncer said, look, I've seen some crap in my years of working in clubs, but this is one of the coldest, meanest ways to break up a marriage I've ever seen. Anyway, I'm sorry. I brushed off the sympathy with a wave of my hand. Don't worry about it. I think I'll just go home, I replied, and change the locks, buddy. Don't let that woman back in the house until you have to, the second bouncer added. I raised an eyebrow and smiled. We talked for another minute and I shook their hands before heading to my car and home. On the way home, I stopped by Menards. It was getting late and it was still an hour before closing time, but I quickly bought everything I needed. New locks and deadbolts, some moving boxes and packing tape. Once I arrived home, I got busy changing locks and assembling boxes. A few hours later, I had several boxes filled with Catherine's things. Before I started to feel the adrenaline of being so completely and utterly abandoned by my wife and supposed friends, I had to sit down. I poured myself a whiskey and Coke and then fired up my laptop. I opened our bank website and started doing the usual things you do when you're betrayed by your spouse. I blocked and then canceled our joint credit cards. I opened a new account, then transferred half of our joint savings and vacation accounts into it. All of this would take a few days, but I had a few hundred in cash so I could wait. As the sugar from the Coke and whiskey worked its way through my system, I perked up and opened our legal folder. It was full of legal documents including the deeds to the house, the 2 investment properties we had bought, and the prenuptial agreement we had drawn up when we got married. Now I know what you're thinking. There's an adultery clause in it. No, that's where you're wrong. For the most part, the prenup protected my business assets. When we started dating and got married, I had just started my accounting business. However, after starting the business, I got a couple of good mentors who gave me wise counsel, and we formalized the business that supported my practice in my name only. Catherine and I signed a prenuptial agreement that the other accounts, my business, and all other subsidiaries were not to be divided. Looking back now, I'm sure Catherine agreed so easily because she knew one day she would likely betray me for her lover, but she didn't realize how much it would cost her. I fell into a restless sleep that night, but I managed to hold on for a few hours until I woke up and decided to head out for breakfast. I traveled around the area a bit and found a great diner that served traditional American breakfast dishes that I enjoyed. While I ate and enjoyed a strong coffee, I called Sally Morrison, a lawyer I'd worked with on several client matters over the years, outlining what was going on and asking about divorce proceedings. The conversation was one of disbelief, but I laid out to Sally everything that had happened. She told me that she would be ready to file the papers on Monday morning and would refer me to someone in her firm who could help. Of course, she let me know she was sorry. I spent another hour in the cafe. I didn't really know what I was doing other than surfing the web on my laptop and feeling a little sorry for myself. When I got home, Robert and Jessica had already parked in the driveway and got out of their car when I parked on the curb. "Mike, started Jessica. I raised my hand before she could continue, and she stopped. "Michael," I said. "Excuse me?" repeated Jessica. "My name is Michael. Only my friends can call me Mike," I said flatly. "Listen, buddy," Robert began, trying to sound conciliatory. "We're sorry about how last night went. It's not like—" I raised my hand again and he stopped, as did his wife. I looked at the tree on the other side of the road for a moment. It was a large tree that had had one of its limbs ripped off during the recent storm. The branch had collapsed onto the carport but hadn't hit the house. As I looked at it, I thought the analogy of a tree losing a branch fit what I was feeling just right. Losing Catherine made me feel like my arm had been cut off. When I looked back at Robert and Jessica a moment later, tears were streaming down my face and anger burned white-hot in my eyes. "Don't you dare, Robert. Don't you dare make excuses," I hissed. "You've known that woman has been cheating on me behind my back for months and you say nothing." "But Michael, it's true," started to say Jessica. "Love," I finished, interrupting her as I felt warm tears continue to flow down my face. "Spare me the sanctimonious nonsense, woman. Real love doesn't stab others in the back to get its way. Real love is compassionate. It cares about what happens to those around it, not abandoning them or humiliating them without warning and then wiping its feet on them in front of the whole crowd. I thought what Catherine and I had was true love. I never doubted her. I worshipped the ground she walked on, and I loved her so much I would have given her everything." "I know," Jessica said, and tears came to her eyes. "But Catherine and Tyler—" "Stop," I shouted, my rage boiling over in that single word. My tears suddenly disappeared. "Stop," I said more quietly. "Jessica, I don't want to hear another word about Catherine and Tyler. I don't want to hear another word about their love and the fact that they're meant to be together. I just wasted the last few years of my life lying. 7 goddamn years, Jessica. Years of having me by her side when she was struggling with identity issues, when she felt like Tyler had abandoned her. Years of encouraging her to grow beyond her limits. Years of severe period pains every month and years of family planning. And let's not forget the years of talking about growing old together. I wasted years because I was only plan B. But tell me, why, friend?" I said, putting emphasis on the word. "Why can this jerk come back and get her while I spent years investing in a woman I loved unconditionally?" They looked at me like I was a child who didn't understand anything. I continued, and the pain and anguish burst out. "He gets all my labors. He gets the woman I created when he abandoned her. He gets all her friends who betrayed me before she had true love. At least they had the decency to look ashamed at that last statement." "Well, screw it," I exclaimed. "Now she's going to get what she deserves. And you were both part of it, so get the hell off my property." "Mike," said Robert. I glared. "Look, I get it. None of us thought this would happen. We honestly thought Catherine and you would be happy forever. We thought you'd have kids. But Tyler is back and we can all see how much they love each other. We know it sucks, but they deserve to be happy. What about me and my happiness?" I asked them. "What do I deserve?" None of them knew what to answer. I sighed. "I'll tell you what I deserve. I deserve a faithful wife. I deserve friends who care about me. But I don't get any of those things, so screw you. I don't need your pity. None of you, including this woman, seem to care about me if it conflicts with them. So if I seem bitter, it's because I am. However, put yourself in my shoes. I said. I looked at Jessica. Robert. When Jessica finds her true love and leaves you for him, you'll understand how I feel. But Robert is my... Robert's hand tightened on Jessica's arm, silencing her. All right, Michael, Robert said. You've made your point and you don't want to see things from the other side. We're leaving. But as a final friendly gesture, is there anything we can do? I thought for a moment, then looked at the minivan they had parked in the driveway. Yeah, wait here. Over the next few minutes, I took out, well, practically threw out, several boxes of Catherine's clothes, makeup, and personal items. I tossed the boxes in front of them, and a couple times I could hear the fragile items shattering. I saw them flinch but didn't say anything. I thought about just leaving them in the driveway, but since you're here, you can just take them to the woman's new home, wherever their love nest is, I said. But Catherine said she needs a house and you're going to move, said Jessica. I laughed, silencing her before she could say another word. It's not her house. It doesn't belong to her, but it doesn't belong to me either, so she'll know she's out of luck. Tell that woman she doesn't need to come back here. Everything that belongs to her is in these boxes. Also tell her my lawyer's going to mail her divorce papers on Monday. I've already taken all her stuff and taken myself off the registry, so everything that's left belongs to me. You didn't even... Jessica started and stopped. What? I asked. Fight. Hell no. She's in love with him. She cheated on me and she's been lying to me for years about where her loyalties lie. No, I'll give her what she gets. No more, no less. There was nothing more to say, and I watched them load most of the boxes into their van and drive away. I think they were a little sad they realized that by supporting Catherine they had lost my friendship, but if they were remorseful, I wasn't there to see it. That night I got drunk and cried like a baby. I got angry and pounded my fist into the wall. In doing so, I broke the vase that Catherine and I had bought on vacation for our first wedding anniversary. In my rage at being abandoned by my wife and friends, I trashed almost the entire living room. If an item wasn't tied down, I threw it. If it was tied down, I used everything else to smash it to pieces. In the hallway, I punched more holes in the walls. I let the anger boiling inside of me boil over, ripping almost all the doors off the cabinets in the kitchen and even leaving a couple big dents on the refrigerator. I don't remember the drive home. I sat in my car in our driveway for probably an hour before I could bring myself to go inside the house. When I finally did, everything felt foreign, colder, emptier, even though nothing had physically changed. The next morning, I found a note on the kitchen counter. Catherine had come back sometime while I was sleeping to pack some things. The note was brief. She was staying with Tyler. She'd be in touch about arrangements, and she was sorry for the pain she'd caused. As I read and reread the note, a terrible reality began to sink in. My marriage was over. 5 years of what I thought was love and companionship had been stripped away in one evening. I felt hollow, like someone had reached inside me and scooped out everything that made me who I was. I called in sick to work Monday. I didn't trust myself to be around people yet. The anger was still too raw, too unpredictable. I spent most of the day wandering around the house, looking at the remnants of our shared life, photos, wedding gifts, furniture we'd picked out together. Each item felt like evidence of my own stupidity. By evening, I couldn't stand being in the house anymore. I went to Murphy's Pub on High Street and drank until they cut me off. The alcohol didn't help. It just made everything feel sharper, more painful. When I got home, the rage that had been building all day finally exploded. I don't remember everything that happened next, but I remember the sound of glass breaking. I remember the satisfaction of throwing our wedding picture against the wall and watching it shatter. I remember kicking over chairs, ripping cushions, smashing lamps. If an item wasn't tied down, I threw it. If it was tied down, I used everything else to smash it to pieces. In the hallway, I punched holes in the walls. I let the anger boiling inside me boil over, ripping almost all the doors off the cabinets in the kitchen and even leaving a couple big dents on the refrigerator. I woke up the next morning with a hangover, a headache, bloody knuckles, possibly a broken hand, and scratches all over my arms and legs. I roughly applied a few bandages to my arms and hands, knowing that I would need to take myself to a doctor to get everything checked out properly. I looked around the living room, noting that I would have to replace almost everything, as not a single piece of furniture escaped my wrath. Along the hallway were unevenly spaced holes I'd made, taking out my frustration on the unsuspecting walls. In the kitchen, cabinet doors were lying all over the floor and appliances stood in positions that could never work properly. I wrinkled my nose as I looked at the 3 large dents in the refrigerator and vaguely remembered how, at the time, hitting the metal door had given me such pleasure. In the dented refrigerator, I found orange juice that had expired just a couple days ago, so I grabbed a couple pain relief tablets and took a big gulp. After half an hour, the throbbing in my head subsided and I moved into the living room, sat on the floor between the broken chairs and stared at the cracked TV. The rest of the day passed like a blur. I took myself to the doctor and had my hands examined. There were hairline fractures on both hands and they would have to be bandaged for a while to heal. I received messages from several people, including Robert and Jessica, but didn't respond to any of them. I ended up going to bed that night with no idea if I had done anything that day other than stare at the TV and go to the doctor. The next day was Monday and I went to the office at the usual time. The first thing I did was check my email for Friday and everything that had come in over the weekend, and then got ready for a team meeting at 9 o'clock to plan everyone's activities for the week. I had a team of 15 people and for the most part we worked well together. Around 8:30, my receptionist, an older woman in her 50s named Colleen, walked into the office, took one look at me, pulled out a chair and sat down. "So, bad weekend, huh?" she asked, looking at my hands and bandages. I hadn't said a rude word to her in the 3 years we'd been working together, but when I looked at her she sighed. "Michael, I'm so sorry. It must have been bad. What happened?" she asked. I sighed and stared at the screen for a moment, then took my hands off the keyboard and turned to face the office administrator. "Catherine dumped me for her true love," I admitted in a very inexpressive voice. "What?" exploded Colleen. "No, you're making this up. Seriously, Michael, don't." I raised my bandaged hands, feeling my eyes watering. I shook my head. "It's true," I told her. "We had an informal reunion Friday night. It seemed like all of her classmates knew it was coming, including Robert and Jessica. They all knew that Catherine and her lover had been having fun behind my back for months. They just decided to ambush me after finding out about it on Friday night." With those words I broke down and cried for the first time since it had happened. Colleen came over to me and hugged me. I told her how I had gotten drunk on Saturday and in a wild rage had smashed almost all the furniture in the house, putting holes in the walls throughout at least half the house. I told her how I had taken myself to the doctor yesterday to get my hands bandaged, all the while nursing a terrible hangover. By the time 9 o'clock came, we both tried our best to dry our eyes. Colleen led everyone into our large meeting room just in time, and once everyone was seated I walked in and sat down. "Hope everyone had a good weekend," I said, getting a few nods around the room, but everyone tried not to look at my bandages. "This week," I started to say, but Colleen interrupted me, raising her hand to stop me. "I'm sorry, Michael, but I can't let that happen. After what happened to you last weekend, you can't pretend like everything is normal," Colleen stated. I hesitated for a moment and then nodded. Colleen looked at me again, that look indicating that she wanted to bring everyone up to speed, at least in general terms. After a moment's thought, I nodded in agreement, knowing that she would only share what would be helpful. Michael was betrayed this weekend by his wife and a few friends. Catherine had been cheating on him for the past few months and decided to leave him in one of the most heartless and disgusting ways possible, humiliating him in front of a group of people, some of whom were supposed to be his friends. Colleen paused for a moment to let everyone comprehend what she'd said, then focused on one man who sat almost hidden at the other end of the table. "Isn't that right, James?" asked Colleen. James Carlson was one of our tax preparers. He was also one of Catherine's classmates, and I realized for the first time that both he and his wife had been there Friday night, watching the scene unfold. James hadn't spoken to anyone in particular since arriving at the office, but when he saw me he tried to be as inconspicuous as possible. When Colleen spoke, he turned pale. When she called out to him, he tried to squeeze into the chair he was sitting in while all the heads in the room turned to focus on him. He said. James, Colleen replied in a stern, grandmotherly voice. Were you or were you not there Friday night? Yes, but, James tried to say. And did you or did you not know that your employer's wife was having an affair with someone in your class? Asked Colleen firmly. James swallowed. Be honest, James. James lowered his gaze to the desk in front of him. I knew, he said very quietly. For a moment no one said anything. The air in the room was thick with tension. Until today, it seemed to me that everyone in the room had each other's backs. Almost everyone in the room was bristling with angry looks directed at James. Okay, James, Colleen said after a few moments. Now I think you need to leave the room. I think you need to think about your future at this firm, because if we find out that you supported Catherine in any way in the events of this past weekend, you will be summarily dismissed. Do you understand? He swallowed again, then stood up. I understand, and tried to leave the room as quietly as possible. No one said anything. For the most part, I'd forgotten that James had been in the room on Friday while everything was happening. I hardly noticed anyone except the main players who were ruining my life. Cleared my throat. Everyone, I said, trying to bring us back to the current moment. I'm not going to lie, my personal life sucks, and you can all guess that my weekend wasn't pleasant. I held up my hands to emphasize that. But we all have work to do and clients to take care of this week. I'm just going to trust that you all have each other's backs. And if you need anything specific, let Colleen know. I'll be here, but if we're all being real about what's going on, I'll be distracted, so please bear with me. I nearly cried again as everyone in the room began to express sympathy and words of encouragement. One last thing, I said. It's hard for me to say this, but don't crucify James just yet. I realize you're all angry and James is an easy scapegoat, but let's take some time and get the whole story before we execute one of our own. Everyone muttered but agreed. Colleen ran the rest of the meeting for me. After breaking off the meeting, I went back to my office and stared out the window. A few minutes later, Colleen knocked. Turning to the door, I saw her standing there with a very subdued James standing right behind her. I invited them in, and James obediently closed the door behind him before taking the seat Colleen pointed out to him. I think you and James need to talk, Michael, she said simply. I nodded, settling into my chair while James sat down on the other side of my desk. I continued to stare out the window of my office, a maelstrom of emotions still swirling in my head. It wasn't even 10 o'clock in the morning yet, and I was already looking forward to a drink. James cleared his throat. I shifted my gaze to him and he lowered his eyes. It was still Monday morning, and Colleen had just left us alone to talk. So, I said, an accusation in my voice. Michael, he stopped and then laughed for a moment. Something funny? Asked Colleen with a hint of anger lurking beneath her usual professional manner. James smiled at me, but it was an unhappy smile, sad and full of sorrow. No, there's nothing funny about this whole situation, James lamented. My boss has been betrayed, and in addition to my wife yelling at me all day yesterday, I'm about to lose my job. So no, there's nothing funny, but I'm either laughing with gallows humor or crying. I smiled cautiously at the guy I had always liked. James was a hard worker, and until this morning when Colleen brought him to my attention, I thought he would stay with us forever. I smiled back. James, why don't you start at the beginning? I asked, trying to sound casual and supportive. He nodded awkwardly, adjusting himself in the chair he was sitting in. I assume you've heard many times about how perfect Catherine and Tyler were together in high school? He asked. I nodded. Over the past few days I haven't heard anything but, I replied. He nodded. I was always a math kid in school. I wasn't bullied, but I wasn't in the popular crowd either. However, we all followed Catherine and Tyler. They were the king and queen of our year. James looked at me, looking for a reaction. Receiving none, he continued. When senior year was coming to an end and college acceptances became known, we all thought they would go together. But the whole school was shocked when Tyler announced he was going away without Catherine. He paused again. I nodded. I knew something of the story, and with a wordless gesture I asked him to continue. They broke up a week before graduation. Tyler went to a few parties, but Catherine never went. I saw Catherine twice during the break between graduating high school and going to college. She seemed broken and withdrawn. Then a few months later I found out from someone that Tyler was living out east. He had a full scholarship thanks to his family, and there was gossip that he already had a girlfriend. I nodded again. I had also heard it from Catherine when I had helped her get back on her feet while we were dating. She had cried into my shoulder a few times in the early days about how hurt she was that Tyler had dumped her and gotten himself another girl. It was after one of those conversations that Catherine and I kissed for the first time and I asked her out. After that, Tyler became a distant memory to Catherine. That's how it was until recently. James, I continued, bringing me out of my memories. I went to college, got my degree, met and married Sherry, and was lucky enough to get a job here. His smile was a little bittersweet. I was surprised when I found out you married Catherine, James admitted. To be honest, I was pleased to see how happy she was with you. After all, Tyler leaving caused her so much pain, and the fact that she met a good man to help her get back on her feet made me happy. For a moment James sank into his thoughts, and I intervened. So when did you find out about Tyler and Catherine's affair? I asked, surprised at the neutral tone of my voice. I think James was surprised too, as he looked at me a little strangely, but there was no hostility in it. About an hour before Catherine and you showed up for dinner, he said dejectedly. A few people from the class were talking. I caught something about Catherine leaving you for Tyler that evening, and my surprise was reflected on everyone's faces. I threw James a questioning look. He sighed. Before dinner, only a few people knew what had happened, but everyone in the class was told that Catherine and Tyler had to be together. Robert and Jessica took Sherry and I aside and said that's what happened. And while they feel sorry for you, Catherine made her choice and you're just not a part of her future. I started to object, and then Robert remembered that I worked for you. He explicitly told me that if I said anything to you, I would regret it. He said it would be best if Sherry and I left if I couldn't keep my mouth shut. I looked at James. The guy was really hurting remembering that conversation. I saw an embarrassed blush run down his neck and wondered if his eyes were moist. Sorry, Michael. We couldn't stay for dinner. Sherry wanted us to stay. She wanted us to be there for you, but Robert and a few of the guys actually escorted us out, telling us to stay away. James, I started to say, feeling guilty in front of the guy. He raised his hand to stop me. I'm sorry, Michael. I need to finish this. I promised Sherry. I nodded again. I have to admit I was stunned, he continued. I had just been banished from the reunion because your wife was going to betray you, and I was made a fool of. Sherry and I didn't know what to do, so we went straight to the club. Once again, we both agreed that we wanted to be there for you. What happened? I asked, tilting my head to the side. I didn't see you there. We were there by the time you got there, though we were already standing in the back. A few guys kept us from getting through to you until Catherine told you. When you left, they let us go. After a few minutes, Sherry and I ran after you, but by the time we got to the exit, you were gone. We probably stood in front of the club for about a half hour, stunned but not sure what to do. Eventually Sherry convinced me that we should go back inside and see what was going on. James paused, looking at me and trying to figure out how much more to tell. I nodded my head at him again, and he gulped. When Sherry and I got back to the club, We were persona non grata to a little over half the class. The other half were disgusted. And when it got to them that I was working for you, they kind of surrounded us and wouldn't let anyone near us for the rest of the evening. And I started but couldn't finish. They danced and drank without a care in the world, James said, swallowing hard. I noticed his mouth was dry. I'm sorry, Michael, but they acted like you were nothing. The few scraps of conversation that reached us said that this had been planned for months. It was even worse when the gossip said that Catherine and Tyler were planning to get married as soon as they could. James looked at the ground. He clenched his hands in his lap. We didn't sleep well at home that night. Sherry and I ended up fighting over everything last night, even though we were both repulsed by Catherine and Tyler's behavior. That eventually led us to this morning and this, James said, pulling a piece of paper out of his notebook and placing it on the table in front of me. What's this? I asked, taking the piece of paper and quickly reading the words. My letter of resignation, he said with defeat. I noted that it was signed and dated yesterday. James, I began. No, Michael, he replied. It's wrong what they did to you, and I couldn't help you even though you were a great boss and, dare I say it, a friend. You deserve better than that. Sherry and I agreed that I'd rather resign than have you see what happened to you Friday night every time you look at me. For a moment we were silent. I looked at his resignation letter again and laughed. Well, it was more like a bark than a laugh, but for the first time I felt something other than sadness and anger. Colleen and James looked at me. I pinched the page in the middle along the long edge and tore it in two. Your resignation is rejected, I said. Behind us I saw Colleen smile. James looked shocked. But Michael, what? Why? He tried to say. James, first of all, my friends call me Mike. Given what you just told me, I'd like you to consider me a friend. You tried to help and tried to warn me, but you couldn't. That wasn't your fault. That was Robert and those other jerks who threatened you. I paused for a moment, collecting my thoughts. Second, if I fire everyone who was at that reunion Friday night, I'd lose 4 clients and one of my best employees. That doesn't make business sense. Third, I continued, from what you've told me, you and Sherry were more loyal to me than my own wife and supposed best friends were. You tried to stay for dinner to support me. You went to the club to be there for me. You chased after me when I left. Hell, you even fought with your wife about it because you felt bad about what happened. That tells me a lot about your character. James looked like he might cry. But I should have. I held up my hand. James, you did what you could under the circumstances. Robert threatened your job if you said anything. What were you supposed to do? Risk your family's livelihood to warn me about something that was probably going to come out anyway. I leaned back in my chair. Look, I won't lie. Friday night was the worst night of my life. But it wasn't because you didn't warn me. It was because my wife chose to humiliate me in the most public, cruel way possible. That's on her and Tyler, not on you. Colleen nodded approvingly. Michael's right, James. From what I can see, you were caught in an impossible situation. So here's what's going to happen, I continued. You're going to go back to your desk, you're going to tear up any other copies of that resignation letter you might have, and you're going to keep being the excellent employee you've always been. And if anyone from that reunion gives you grief about still working here, you tell them to go to hell. James smiled for the first time since he'd walked into my office. You sure about this, Mike? I'm sure. Now get out of here before I change my mind, I said with a grin. After James left, Colleen sat back down. You did the right thing, she said. Maybe. We'll see how it plays out. I rubbed my temples. What's my schedule like today? Light, thankfully. You have the Peterson audit review at 2, and that's about it for appointments. Everything else can be moved if you need it to be. No, let's keep the schedule. Work might be the only thing that keeps me sane right now. Colleen nodded and headed for the door, then turned back. Michael? For what it's worth, I think Catherine is an idiot. You're a good man, and she threw away something real for some fantasy about high school romance. Her loss. After she left, I sat alone in my office for a few minutes, processing everything James had told me. It was clear that this whole thing had been orchestrated, that Catherine and Tyler had been planning this for months. The betrayal felt even deeper now, knowing how calculated it had been. My phone rang, jolting me out of my thoughts. I glanced at the caller ID and saw it was Sally Morrison, a lawyer I'd worked with on several client matters over the years. We'd developed a good professional relationship, and I'd mentioned my situation to her briefly last week. "Hey, Sally. Mike, I've been thinking about what you told me about your divorce situation. I want you to come in this afternoon if you can. There are some things we need to discuss about the proceedings, and I think you're going to be very interested in what I have to say. Good news or bad news? For you, very good news. For Catherine, well, let's just say she may not be as smart as she thinks she is." I felt a grim smile spread across my face. "I'll be there at 4. Perfect. And Mike, bring any financial documents you have. Bank statements, investment accounts, business records, the works. We're going to make sure you get everything you're entitled to." After I hung up, I realized that for the first time since Friday night, I was actually looking forward to something. Maybe Catherine thought she could humiliate me and then waltz away with half of everything I'd worked for, but she was about to find out just how wrong she was. The prenup she'd signed so eagerly was about to become her worst nightmare. That afternoon, I drove to Sally's law office with a briefcase full of financial documents. Sally greeted me with a grim smile that told me she had some very interesting news. "Michael, sit down. You're going to love this." She spread out some papers on her desk. "I've been going over that prenup you and Catherine signed, and I have to say, it's one of the most ironclad agreements I've ever seen. Your business mentor really knew what he was doing." "What do you mean?" "Well, Catherine just filed her divorce petition, and she's asking for 75% of your marital assets and 50% of your business." Sally's grin widened. "Unfortunately for her, the prenup specifically states that your business and all related income are completely protected. Not only that, but any assets purchased with business income, which includes your house, your investment properties, and most of your savings, are also protected." I felt a surge of satisfaction. "So what does she actually get?" "According to this document, she's entitled to exactly half of what you two accumulated together during the marriage from non-business sources. Based on what you've shown me, that comes to about $8,000. $8,000? I couldn't help but laugh. She thought she was going to get hundreds of thousands. "That's not all," Sally continued. "She also filed for a restraining order that would prohibit you from your own house. The problem is, the house isn't in her name. It belongs to a trust that your business pays rent to, which means she has no legal claim to it whatsoever." "Can she do that? File a restraining order on a house she doesn't own?" "She can file it, but it won't hold up. I'm going to have it thrown out by Monday morning. In fact, I'm counterfiling for harassment." As I left Sally's office, I felt better than I had since Friday night. Catherine thought she could humiliate me and then take me to the cleaners, but she was about to learn a very expensive lesson about underestimating people. When I got home that evening, I was surprised to find Catherine standing in my driveway. She looked nervous, fidgeting with her purse and looking around like she was expecting someone. "Michael," she began as I got out of my car. I suddenly spit into the grass, stopping her mid-sentence. "What?" I replied, pausing for a moment. "Are you surprised that I'm taking care of myself after my wife betrayed me in front of a whole group of people? Afraid I'd kill myself because you ripped my heart out without warning? Afraid I might lie in a puddle of my own vomit? Drunk? Because you screwed me up so badly I couldn't function?" I stared at her, and Catherine had the decency to take a half step back and pale slightly. "It wasn't like that, Mike. I never meant to hurt." "Don't!" I almost yelled at her, interrupting the usual cheater's excuses. She was silent for a moment, then just nodded her head. "Like hell I believe that, Catherine. You purposely, and I mean purposely, lined things up to very specifically tell me that you were leaving me in front of people I thought were friends. You purposely set out to destroy me. She looked down at her feet. Mike, it wasn't my idea to do it that way, she said quietly. Robert and Tyler thought that if we did it this way, you wouldn't try to resist. I threw my head back and laughed. You've got to be kidding me, I said bitterly, sitting back down on my front steps. I mean, we've known each other for years, been married for 5 years, and you think that when I find out you're leaving me, I'm going to try to fight for you? Catherine blushed. But, no buts, I hissed at her. You gave up any claim to my attention or protection the moment you spread your legs for that man. It just took me a while to find out about it. However, now it's out in the open, and you can back off. Mike, you can't talk to me like that. I'm still your wife after all, replied Catherine, anger rising in her voice. Ha! I said, walking up the driveway and past her to the front door. I pulled out my keys and unlocked the door. When I walked in, Catherine was about to follow me, but I held up my hand and stopped her. You're not invited, I told her without ceremony. But Mike, this is still my house too, she said. That I shook my head. No, it isn't, and it never was. The house belongs to a trust, and my business pays rent to the trust every month. She looked at me with an incomprehensive look. Catherine, this isn't your house anymore. You don't live here. But wait, I have a few things for you. I closed the door behind me, walking into my office. I sent a quick text to Sally to let her know Catherine was here, grabbed a few things, and went back to the front door. Catherine was still standing there. Mike, she began. I raised my hand in the universal sign for shut your mouth. First of all, this is Michael. I told you that only my friends can call me Mike, and you're definitely not a friend. Catherine gulped. Second, I said, holding out a small folder to her. Here's a check for your half of our marital assets. Her eyes widened. The amount of the check she suddenly held in her hand told her more than any divorce papers could. Third, I'm told you have something for me. She looked unsure for a moment, then opened her purse, pulled out a manila envelope, and held it out to me. I'm sorry, Michael. You will be, I said cryptically. I opened the envelope as she stood beside me and flipped through the first few pages. I snorted and looked up at her. Catherine blushed as she realized I was reading that in return for my divorce filing, she wanted 75% of our savings and 50% of my business. I flipped back a page and came across the next document. A restraining order that would go into effect on Monday and prohibit me from my own house or being within 100 meters of Catherine or Tyler. Really? I asked, raising my eyebrows. She couldn't look me in the eye. At that moment, she knew everyone had gone too far. To be honest, Catherine had always gone with the flow. Now she was going to be in a lot more pain than she could have ever imagined. I pulled out my phone and called my divorce attorney. I stood and looked at Catherine, who was practically trembling. Sally? It's Michael. I have Catherine standing in front of me at my house, and in addition to demanding that I respond to the divorce petition, she's serving me with a restraining order that, in addition to telling me to stay away from her and that man, includes my own house, which she no longer lives in. Listening to Sally swear like a sailor, I watched Catherine turn several shades of red as she clearly heard the profanity on the other end of the line. Sally would sort it out and tell me what to do. So, I said, turning to Catherine as I hung up the phone, how does it feel to be one of the most disgusting human beings on the planet, Catherine? She was silent for a moment. It's not like that, Michael, Catherine replied quietly. I convinced Tyler that we should give you until Monday to move out, so we can move in. I laughed. You can't move in. It's not your house, I said, confirming the fact. But you can't be here, she replied somewhat irritably, like a 5-year-old who didn't get her way. I shrugged my shoulders. Perhaps, and believe me, that nasty trick won't go unnoticed. But just because I can't be here doesn't mean you and that man can be. I think it's time for you to leave, Catherine. I'd wish you well, but that would be a lie. Do you hate me that much? She asked, looking at my bandaged hands but not asking the obvious question. Do you seriously have the nerve to ask me that after you did what you did? And now you're handing me this paperwork? I answered her like she was the dumbest person on the planet. At this point, I wasn't sure if she was beyond help. She waited without saying anything. Catherine, you were my everything. You were my best friend. There was no one in this world I trusted more than you, and then in one fell swoop you ripped it all away from me and treated me no better than gum you scrape off your shoe. In my eyes, you've become a damn piece of trash. So tell me, oh wisest one, at what point in doing this to me and destroying my life did you think my love wouldn't turn into instant anger and hatred for you? I folded my bandaged arms across my chest. Catherine's eyes widened at the fact that I'd used language she'd never heard me use before, but for me to direct it solely at her. She scrutinized her hands for a few moments and then looked up at me. I was hoping. She paused and took a breath. Michael, you're right. We've had many good years together, but the restraining order is only in effect until the divorce is finalized and things settle down. Robert, Jessica, myself, and even Tyler hope that someday we can be friends when things settle down. Friends! I roared and exploded. She jerked back as my bandaged hands dropped the envelope and moved expressively. You've got to be kidding me. Friends? I hissed. If any of you were on fire, I'd drink a gallon of gasoline just to make sure you burn to a crisp. Friends? You're delusional. I noticed movement behind her. Robert and Jessica were coming up the driveway quickly, and I saw Tyler standing on the side of the road. It looked like they had gotten out of a truck across the street when I exploded at Catherine. Oh look, here are our friends, I said sarcastically, looking at them. Mike, Robert said, coming up behind Catherine. Calm down, buddy. You don't need to. Back off, I answered him. We're not buddies or friends or even acquaintances anymore. Your betrayal is almost as bad as hers. So don't think you have anything to say that's going to help here. I glared at the couple who'd set Catherine and me up and then actually participated in our destruction. You both have blood on your hands, and you're just as guilty as her and that coward over there. I gestured at Tyler, who had stolen my wife but didn't even have the guts to walk up to the driveway and defend her. Mike, said Jessica, trying to speak firmly. My gaze and fury turned to her. Don't you dare, Jessica. You have no moral fiber whatsoever. You actively helped my wife cheat on me. Both of you, I said, gesturing to Jessica and Robert. You both helped set up that scene at the club to cause me maximum humiliation. They stopped and stood there. I saw Jessica start to open her mouth, but I interrupted her. And don't you dare give me any garbage about true love. You already tried that. Don't forget that you both introduced me to her and pushed me to date and marry her, and then you both betrayed me so easily without a second thought. If you think that's what love is, then burn this damn world to ashes, because there's no hope for society if either of you are an example. They looked at me, surprised by the venom in my voice. I stopped, and then a light bulb came on. Jessica, tell me, will you forgive Robert after he comes home smelling of perfume after spending all night at that gentleman's club downtown? I smiled, my tone losing its anger and taking on a condescending tone. Jessica stopped, eyes wide, and then looked at Robert. Baby, that's not true, Robert tried to say. I laughed, and they all looked at me. Oh, it's not true? Robert, you forget that James does your business taxes. Adult entertainment expenses have been showing up in your client meeting category for months. James mentioned it to me when we were trying to clean up your books, I said, watching with satisfaction as Robert started to object, but Jessica sensed the truth. Robert took a step back, and a moment later he was running down the road with his wife chasing after him, yelling that I looked at Tyler. He was staring in surprise, then at Catherine. Michael, she said. You didn't have to do that. I grinned and leaned forward. Don't worry, Catherine. I watched as she perked up her ears, And sure enough, a shiver of worry ran down her spine when I said her name. This is only the first shot. Robert still has a lot of secrets, and in this story, Robert and Jessica will only get a fraction of my wrath. I'll save the rest for those who claim true love. I smiled at her, seeing how this time she physically flinched as my words penetrated her selfish mind. What do you mean? Catherine asked. Go away, Catherine, I said, changing the subject and not directly addressing her question. Tell Tyler to come get you. Run along now. After Catherine and Tyler disappeared with their truck, I slammed the door shut, letting out one of those chuckles that bad guys in movies always make. 10 minutes later, I looked outside, but Catherine, along with Tyler and the truck, were gone. I sat down on the floor, my limbs shaking from the confrontation I'd experienced, and broke down again. I loved her, but I hated her. I wanted to see her broken and remorseful, regretting that she had betrayed me. I sat on the ground and cried for what we once had. I still wanted her to come back, to apologize, to use all the cliches about cheating and come back into my life. Of course, I knew that wasn't going to happen, and even if it did, I would never again be able to accept a single caress without question. The next month was filled with the usual stuff. Lawyers, financial disclosures, and figuring out who gets what in the divorce. At work, the staff rallied around me. Colleen helped me find a counselor. I met with him twice a week to start working through my feelings. I moved into an apartment for a short time. This was actually a good thing since I couldn't be in the house while the restraining order was pending. Colleen worked with cleaning and construction crews to clear the house of broken furniture and appliances and then repair the damage. Despite her initial statement that she wanted a clean separation, Catherine ended up wanting to fight about a lot of things. First and foremost were our bank accounts. We only had $20,000 divided between 3 accounts, and she claimed that more than $15,000 of it belonged to her. Next was the house and investment properties. When we married, I already had a house we lived in. I was just starting to invest in the business, but over the years we became convinced that real estate was a smart move. We quickly paid off the additional loan and made some investments to purchase 2 more properties. She contributed to some improvements over the years, but all 3 homes were owned by a trust in which neither of us was a direct beneficiary. She tried to fight this with the help of lawyers who I assume were paid by her lover, but it was all to no avail. All the properties were unavailable to her, and I smiled that she had lost the opportunity to get any return on that investment. Then came the turn of furniture and jewelry. Through my attorney, I learned that all of her belongings were packed in boxes that had been delivered to her. I provided a list including the shoes, earrings, and necklaces that were in the boxes I had packed for her. My final concern was that Catherine was claiming half of my business, citing that she felt she was owed half since we had been together right after I opened the business. Sally angrily laid out the terms of the prenuptial agreement and even managed to give Catherine a moral lecture, explaining that she got nothing from Harrison Accounting. She ended up with $10,000, and I'd say she spent most of that amount on lawyers. I wasn't happy, but it gave me some satisfaction that she walked away with so little and I got to keep my houses and my business, which were worth considerably more. In addition, Sally had somehow gotten Catherine to give up her wedding and engagement rings. The restraining order was lifted because Catherine had no rights to the house. As it was, she couldn't get into the house since the locks had been changed, and I had a security company drive by the house a couple times a week. Before moving back in, once the final terms were set, we only had to wait a couple months for the divorce to become final. There was no word from Catherine. However, James and Sherry had gotten a lot of questions from those they were still socializing with from the reunion, and they both firmly asked everyone to back off. James learned that Catherine and her lover were living in an apartment in town provided by the company he works for. He had rented it for 6 months and then had to either pay for it himself or find another place to live. Putting 2 and 2 together, he decided that by getting together with Catherine he would get a house ready. Too bad for him. About 2 months after the confrontation at my house, the divorce proceedings were moving forward smoothly. The prenup was holding up perfectly, and Catherine's lawyers were finding no loopholes. It was late summer when I received a call that would change everything. "Mike, you need to see this," James said, walking into my office with a thick folder. "Remember that forensic audit we're doing for Kensington Industries?" I nodded. "Show me what you found." The documents James spread across my desk revealed a pattern of embezzlement that had been going on for years. Someone at Kensington had been systematically stealing company funds and using elaborate schemes to hide the theft. As I read through the evidence, a familiar name caught my eye. "James," I said slowly. "This middle manager they're investigating. What's his name again?" "Tyler Matthews," James replied. "Why? Do you know him?" I felt a cold smile spread across my face. "Oh, I know him very well. He's Catherine's new husband." The next month went by in a blur of legal proceedings and forensic accounting work. We delivered our report to Kensington, and within days, Tyler was arrested for embezzling over $2 million. The local news picked up the story, and suddenly everyone knew that Catherine's true love was a criminal. I won't lie. There was a certain satisfaction in knowing that Tyler's house of cards had finally collapsed. But more importantly, it meant Catherine was about to face the harsh reality of what she had given up everything for. Over the next few months, the same scene repeated itself several times with different clients from Catherine's class. Word had gotten around about what had happened, and many of Catherine's former classmates who had supported her affair realized that I would no longer do business with them. One by one, they came to the office trying to get me to continue handling their accounts. Each conversation was similar expressions of regret, attempts to justify their behavior, and finally resignation when I made it clear that our professional relationships were over. "Michael, come on, you have to help me," pleaded Robert during one such visit. Sitting at a table in one of our meeting rooms, Jessica sat next to him, eyes downcast. At a glance, I realized that their relationship was quite strained, which I assumed was a result of their marriage troubles following my revelation about Robert's infidelity. "Really? Are you really going to make me beg, Michael?" Robert's voice was pleading. I looked at him calmly. "I'm wondering why you're here. After all, you all planned to humiliate me. You made excuses and didn't care about my feelings while you all cheered about Catherine and Tyler, telling me to get over it. Well, I got over myself and decided I wanted nothing to do with any of you." Jessica finally spoke up. "You know, you were right," she said quietly, "about everything. We were so caught up in what we thought was romantic that we didn't even think about you. You were right about Robert, too." She looked at her husband with a mixture of sadness and anger. "So what now?" I asked simply. "Now, let's just say our chickens have come home to roost," Jessica replied bitterly. "We've hurt those we loved, and our marriage hangs in the balance. I don't know if it will survive." I looked at the broken couple. Robert couldn't look either of us in the eye, and Jessica was on the verge of a breakdown. "I can't say I'm not pleased to hear that you're both suffering," I said softly. "However, the fact remains that as the managing partner of Harrison Accounting, I have made the decision that it is not in the best interest of this business to continue servicing your company. However," I continued, "I am not without mercy. I can recommend 3 firms that will willingly take on your account. James has a list of their credentials." James held out a sheet of paper across the table. "If you're interested, just let James know, and we can send any of them your financial statements from previous years." "That's it?" Robert asked. "A recommendation? Are you really done with us?" "Yes," I replied. "You chose to ruin my marriage by supporting Catherine and Tyler. That's cause and effect." With those words, I got up and left the room without saying goodbye. Although I lost 4 clients this way, amazingly, I gained 6 more other people from Catherine's class who in no way supported what had happened and wanted to show their support by bringing me their business. Not that Harrison Accounting needed the work, but I didn't turn it down. By early fall, the divorce decree was finalized. I had moved back into the renovated house. My hands were fully healed, and I could admit to myself that I missed looking like a boxer, but I didn't miss the itch from the bandages. The day I got the paperwork, I received a call from Catherine that I didn't return, and I got a text message that I did read. It simply said, "Goodbye, Michael. I'm sorry. I wasn't sure how I felt." Did she feel genuine remorse for what she had done? In the months since the incident at the club, the pain of the betrayal had subsided considerably. Of course, I was still angry and upset, but I had a logical mindset, and if Catherine could so easily have an affair and leave me, then she wasn't the one for me. That weekend, Colleen and a few team members from work got together and, uninvited, came over to my place for a family barbecue. I was surprised, to say the least, but I hugged probably over 24 people over the course of Saturday afternoon and only knew a third of everyone there. All afternoon I was never alone. There was always someone there, be it Colleen, James, Sherry, or any of a dozen of my staff. At one point, I was sitting with a drink in one hand as James manned the barbecue. Sherry sat with me, and I was just about crying watching a group of small kids playing a game of touch football in my backyard. I knew now that Catherine and I weren't going to have the children we had talked about for the past few years, and watching them hurt me deeply. I felt soft lips on my cheek and looked at Sherry in surprise as she sat down next to me again. She took my hand and touched my cheek. "I understand, Mike, but life will happen again. You'll see. Don't shut yourself off. You'll have the support of many people. You know everyone here. Everyone here knows we are here to support you. What they did to you was unfair. They hurt both James and me, but we need you to know that we're here for you." Sherry hugged me for a few minutes as I cried. A moment later, I felt a hand on my shoulder, and James was there too, a look of compassion on his face. This was followed by another hug from Colleen and a few other staff members. Several times I felt gentle touches on me, letting me know I was supported. I was pretty much a wreck for most of the day, but not once did I feel uncomfortable. The following week at work, I felt much better. The staff noticed that I was smiling and even exchanged a few jokes, which hadn't happened in quite some time. At the weekly staff meeting, I thanked everyone for coming and helping me, naming James and Colleen and giving special mention to Sherry for showing me that there is life even after betrayal. We also had 3 new clients that week, 2 of them very large corporations. It turned out that we were recommended by one of our existing clients. The corporation needed an external, in-depth financial analysis, and we were recommended. We divided up the workload, and for the first time since Catherine left me, I decided to take on some challenging forensic work. It was good work. We had a 3-month window to get results, and we took it on eagerly. In the evenings, I got into a routine of cooking dinner and working out. I knew I could quit my job or, worse, drink myself into oblivion, but I wanted to rise above the betrayal and find life again. Thanks to Colleen and the staff at the office, I had hope of becoming more than just another divorce statistic. That weekend, Colleen and a few team members from work got together and, uninvited, came over to my place for a family barbecue. I was surprised, to say the least, but I hugged probably over 24 people over the course of Saturday afternoon and only knew a third of everyone there. All afternoon I was never alone. There was always someone there, be it Colleen, James, Sherry, or any of a dozen of my staff. At one point, I was sitting with a drink in one hand as James manned the barbecue. Sherry sat with me, and I was just about crying watching a group of small kids playing a game of touch football in my backyard. I knew now that Catherine and I weren't going to have the children we had talked about for the past few years, and watching them hurt me deeply. I felt soft lips on my cheek and looked at Sherry in surprise as she sat down next to me again. She took my hand and touched my cheek. "I understand, Mike, but life will happen again. You'll see. Don't shut yourself off. You'll have the support of many people. You know everyone here. Strangers this afternoon, friends, coworkers, family. Everyone here knows we are here to support you. What they did to you was unfair. They hurt both James and me, but it only echoes, so we need you to know that we're here for you." Sherry hugged me for a few minutes as I cried. A moment later, I felt a hand on my shoulder, and James was there too, a look of compassion on his face. This was followed by another hug from Colleen and a few other staff members. A few times I felt stares or soft touches on me, letting me know I was supported. However, I was pretty much a wreck for most of the day, but not once did I feel uncomfortable. The following week at work, I felt much better. The staff noticed that I was smiling and even exchanged a few jokes, which hadn't happened in quite some time. At the weekly staff meeting, I thanked everyone for coming and helping me, naming James and Colleen and giving special mention to Sherry for showing me that there is life even after betrayal. We also had 3 new clients that week, 2 of them very large corporations. It turned out that we were recommended by one of our old clients. The corporation needed an external, in-depth financial analysis, and we were recommended. We divided up the workload, and for the first time since Catherine left me, I decided to do a forensic audit of one of the companies. It was a good job. We had a 3-month window to get results, and we took it on. In the evenings, I got into a routine of cooking dinner and working out. I knew I could quit my job or, worse, drink, but I wanted to rise above the betrayal and find life again. Thanks to Colleen and the staff at the office, I had hope of becoming more than just another divorce statistic. It was Thursday night, 2 weeks after the barbecue. I was cooking myself a quiet dinner of lamb chops with apple mustard sauce when the doorbell rang. Having just finished cooking, I threw the dish towel I was using on the table and went to the front door. When I opened the door, I was stunned. There stood a beautiful blonde woman, just over 5 feet tall. She looked nervous, but before I could greet her and ask how I could help, she stepped towards me, pulled me down by my shirt, and kissed me. For a moment I was shocked, but her lips were soft and supple. I could taste the mint in her breath, and before I knew it, I was already kissing her back. Her arms wrapped around my waist, and I pulled her to me without thinking, our lips never parting. It may have lasted 30 seconds or 30 minutes. I have no idea how long we kissed, but I know it felt amazing. When we parted, I looked into the face of the stranger I had just kissed and was surprised to find a trace of tears in her eyes. Before I could say hello, however, she pulled back and slapped my face. Not hard, it was more of a gesture, but it was a slap nonetheless. I stood there in shock, and I know it was reflected on my face. The woman's face was mournful but at the same time full of compassion. "I'm sorry, Michael. That wasn't the best way to say hello," the woman said. Her voice sounded sultry yet firm and demanding. I tilted my head to the side, looking at her and wondering who she was. "Sure," I said, leaving the question unanswered. The woman smiled. "Rebecca," she said simply. "Rebecca," I repeated. For a moment, neither of us said anything. "So, Rebecca," I said, looking at her questioningly, "what brings you to me tonight?" She smiled. "You," she said simply. "I suppose I should have guessed that from your greeting. But why did you come to see me?" I asked, smiling. She looked like a little kitten playing with a new toy. "Because you need me to be here," she replied, smiling as well. "True," I replied. "So tell me, why do I need you? I mean, I enjoy kissing a beautiful woman as much as any other man. But to follow it up with a slap when I have no idea how I insulted such a gorgeous creature after such a kiss is baffling to me." Now I saw the amusement in her eyes. "Do you think I'm beautiful?" she asked. I nodded. "And gorgeous?" I added, repeating my words. A smile spread across Rebecca's face, and I was blown away by a woman I'd known for less than 5 minutes. "Thank you, Michael," she said, then blushed and lowered her eyes. "Does something smell nice?" she asked, sniffing the air. I sighed contentedly and opened the door, inviting the strange woman who had apparently come for me into the house. I was sure she was harmless, and I was curious as to what she wanted. We talked for a bit about nothing while I escorted her into the kitchen, pulled out a glass, looked at her, and then poured her a nice Shiraz that I had recently been drinking. Setting the glass in front of her, I watched as she raised a neatly manicured eyebrow, went back into the kitchen, and finished cooking dinner. Luckily, I was making extra for lunch the next day at the office, so I quickly grabbed a second plate and prepared the food for Rebecca. She watched me cook, holding her wine but not sipping it. I placed a plate in front of her, one on the seat next to her, and returned with the cutlery and my own glass of wine, but only after I dimmed the kitchen lights. Rebecca giggled as the light in the room diminished. "Our first date and you ordered for me?" she asked casually. "Well, a woman likes a man who knows what he wants," I replied. Rebecca threw her head back and laughed. Then she looked me in the eye and raised her glass. "To Michael, a friend showing that even wounded, he still knows how to treat a lady," she said as she raised a toast to me. We clinked glasses and sipped our wine. With a smile, I let her taste the dish first, and as she cut off a decent piece of meat and dipped it in the sauce, I saw her eyes widen. "Michael, this is amazing." "Thank you." I nodded and did the same. It was delicious. I got the sweet and tangy flavor of the sauce just right, and it seemed similar to Rebecca's taste. "So, Rebecca, no more games, please. Who are you and what's going on here?" I asked. She took another bite and another sip of wine before answering. "First of all, thank you, Michael. You could have handled what I did there differently, but you did it with absolute grace. I stood at your door for almost 20 minutes before I knocked." I nodded, sipping my wine. "As for who I am, we've met a couple times before. I'm Colleen's niece." I thought for a moment, and a light bulb went off in my head. "Ah, Rebecca. Yes, I'm sorry, but you look very different than the last time we met," I replied. She smiled. There was sadness in her eyes, but it was old pain. I had indeed met Rebecca before, but she looked very different at the time. She was in a goth phase, going after some boy who Colleen had told me was no good. When we first met, she had dyed her hair black, had several piercings in her nose and ears. She was wearing a ton of pale makeup and clothes and boots that would make any goth proud. I remembered she had come into the office about 5 times in a month, each time dressed in all black. As I recall her now, her beautiful blonde hair was dyed black. She had black lipstick and eyeliner and piercings in several places on her face that were no longer there. "He cheated on me with 3 people, 2 girls and a guy," she told me straight. Bringing me out of my memories, I almost snorted the wine I'd drunk. "What?" I said incredulously. "Yes," she said, looking into the wine and recalling the memories. "We were at a club and we went back to another guy's place. I went to the bathroom, and when I came back, I saw this." She threw me a brief glance and then returned her eyes to her wine glass. "I was scared. I was and still am," she said, her eyes briefly finding mine. "Me too," I said. I saw her relax a little. "Anyway," Rebecca continued, "I screamed and ran out of the house, practically ran home to Mom and Dad, and cried for 3 days straight. After a week, Mom talked me into going for a walk with Aunt Colleen, and that's when she brought me to the office and I met you." I smiled. "I remember when we met," she said, smiling. "Aunt Colleen introduced us, and you shook my hand. You didn't look at me like I was a pathetic goth girl who had just been betrayed. You didn't lower your eyes at the way I was dressed or the rings on my face. Do you remember what you asked me?" I nodded. "I asked you what kind of coffee you wanted." Rebecca smiled. "Yes, mocha with a double shot of chocolate." We said at the same time. We both laughed. "You remember?" Rebecca smiled. I nodded and took another sip of wine. She lost the smile. "The slap was because I was at the barbecue that day, and you didn't notice me," she told me, looking straight into my eyes. "I'm sorry, Rebecca. It's been a rough few months," I said. "It's okay, Michael. I didn't mean for it to be a serious slap. I know your head was elsewhere. I just mentally kissed you and then slapped you since you didn't notice me that day. I even managed to hug you that day and tell you everything was going to be okay. But I guess that's what everyone else was doing, and you don't remember much of that day." I looked at her. I had an image of slender arms and a pair of dark blue jeans with a red blouse telling me everything was going to be okay. "Do you remember?" she asked, guessing my thoughts. "Sort of," I admitted. "Red top, blue jeans?" Rebecca smiled and nodded. "I was talking to Aunt Colleen the other day and asked about you." Rebecca blushed slightly. "She's known for a long time that I have a bit of a crush on you, and I think she saw me hug you at the barbecue. So she encouraged me to reach out and come over and talk to you." I chuckled slightly. "Did you know you were coming to kiss me?" "No," Rebecca blushed. "Honestly, I didn't know if I could go through with it. But when you opened the door, I just ignored every impulse to run away and went for it." I smiled and took her hand. "I'm glad you did. Honestly, it was the best thing that's happened to me in months." Rebecca smiled, and we spent the next 3 hours talking. She helped me clean up dinner, and then we continued our conversation over a small glass of port as we moved into my living room. I learned that she was 25, about 4 years younger than me. At 29, I was finally starting to believe I could love again after everything I'd been through. She had just graduated from finance school. She liked a wide variety of music. Though she hated death metal after she stopped being goth, Rebecca took a job as a junior accountant at a manufacturing firm, working in the accounts receivable department, and mostly enjoyed her work. She was close to her family. Her mom and dad had been married for 30 years, and she said she hoped they would live another 30. She had a younger sister who lived in Cincinnati, but they only communicated once a month. Rebecca loved going to the beach, but she had sensitive skin, so she tried to stay out of the sun. She had only had 2 boyfriends, including the goth who had betrayed her, and was upset that she had given him her virginity. We spent that evening talking about ourselves. She learned that I had become estranged from my mother after family strife caused by my father's sudden death. I had a younger sister, but we didn't socialize with her as she was the cause of the family rift. It was close to 1 o'clock in the morning when she left. I think we were both tempted to take things further, but she decided to tell me that we should get to know each other better first. Climbing into bed, I fell asleep with a smile on my face for the first time since my life had fallen apart. Rebecca had bypassed months of trying to overcome my defenses and pain with her bold actions. That kiss caught me off guard and showed me that someone could care about me in a romantic way and that I was open to it. The next morning, the smile on my face was undeniable, and everyone noticed it. By lunchtime, Colleen had me cornered. "Okay, spill it out, Mike." "Who is she?" asked Colleen. I sensed hope in her facial expression. "Rebecca came over last night," I told her. The joyous shriek that Colleen let out was heard throughout the office. My office administrator jumped a couple times, clasping her hands to her chest and letting out a megawatt smile. Colleen then took me into the kitchen and made me tell her everything. She laughed when I told her about the kiss and the slap. Then she happily swayed as I told her about dinner and talking until 1 o'clock in the morning. "Mike, I'm so happy for you. Even if nothing comes out of this, seeing you pull out from under what Catherine and that man did to you is worth it." She then looked at me with a cheeky grin on her face. "But you and Rebecca, I think there's something between you two. I've been thinking about it for a while." We talked for a few more minutes, and Colleen asked if I was going to see Rebecca again. I told her that we had been texting all day and were going to have dinner Friday night in town. She was immensely happy, and that was passed on to everyone else. Friday night came and I went to pick up Rebecca. I asked her to dress up a bit as I wanted our first official date to be one that we would remember. She didn't disappoint. I knocked on her apartment door, and my breath caught again. Rebecca looked amazing. "Wow, I'm speechless again," she laughed. "Every time we meet, you can't even say hello." "Hello, beautiful," I said. "Hello, Michael," Rebecca said, closing her eyes. I laughed. She opened her eyes and smiled. We walked hand in hand to my car, and when I opened the door, Rebecca stopped and stared at me. "Is this your car?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. Rebecca's jaw dropped. "Yes, I'm a Mustang enthusiast, But not just any Mustang. I have a 1967 GT. It's classic gray with black racing stripes and classic trim, but with a modified exhaust. I'll be honest, I was surprised Catherine didn't try to get it in the divorce, but I guess she knew I would have fought tooth and nail if she had tried. This car was my pride and joy and only came out for special occasions. I opened the passenger door for Rebecca. She lowered herself into the seat with a smile. When I started the car, Rebecca giggled and then laughed as the vibration of the V8 swept through the cabin. We drove into town, discussing our work weeks, how Colleen had talked to both of us, and that she had high hopes for us. We had dinner at an upscale Italian restaurant that served a variety of dishes, of which Rebecca and I tried several. After dinner, we headed to a jazz club. We made conversation and left with smiles on our faces and plans for another date. It was the beginning of something beautiful, and over the next several months, Rebecca and I grew closer. Several times throughout our evenings together, guys would come up to her and ask her to dance. Like I said, she looked amazing, but each time she politely but firmly declined. One evening I was on my way back from the bar with a couple drinks for us when one guy stopped me by putting his hand on my shoulder. "You're a lucky son of a gun. I hope you know that," he said to me, and then saw my blank expression. "Your woman is stunning. She's hot, but only has eyes for you. No offense, but I just asked her to dance while you were at the bar, but she flat out turned me down." I mean me! The guy was sturdy and good-looking, probably a personal trainer or football player. I got the impression he knew how to turn on the charm and had probably seduced more than one girlfriend or wife over the years, taking them away from their partners. But Rebecca had turned him down, and he knew there was no chance. The guy patted me on the shoulder, smiled, and walked on. Saturday morning I woke up slowly, smiling as I remembered the night Rebecca and I had spent together. We didn't get out of bed that weekend except to shower or fetch food from the kitchen. When it was time to go to work, I had to drive Rebecca back to her apartment in the dress she wore Friday night. By the time I got to the office, I had 2 more pictures of my girlfriend on my phone. Rebecca stayed with me every night that week except Wednesday, when she had to work late at the office and it was easier for her to get things from her place. "Hey, Mike," James said one Tuesday after going out for coffee. "Do you have a few minutes?" He said this without waiting for an answer and closed the door. "Sure," I said in response, raising an eyebrow and gesturing for him to sit down. I sensed that he wanted to talk about something serious, and I guessed from the look on his face that it had to do with Catherine. "So you and Rebecca are doing well?" he asked. "Yeah," I grinned. "It's only been a few months, but I feel like we've been together for years. I know Sherry and I have been together for just under 5 years, but it feels like it's been 10. James looked at me worriedly for a moment. "Yeah, but not in a bad way." I held up my hand and grinned. "I understand, James." He nodded. "Sherry and I are so happy to see a smile on your face again. By the way, we were wondering if you both would like to have dinner Saturday night at our house." There was something else in that, a nervousness based on hope. "I don't think we have any plans, but I'll double-check with Rebecca," I said. He nodded. Mike," said James, moving on to the topic he'd closed the door for. I sighed. "Catherine?" I asked. "Sort of," James said. "Do you know about the Kensington audit we're doing?" He asked. I nodded. Of the 2 large multinationals we had taken on, Kensington was one of them. James was leading the forensic analysis of their financial statements. "We've run into a couple problems, and I need some guidance," he said to me. "Okay, show me what you have," I told him. James laid out some reports, but in addition to a number of problems, they indicated that one of their middle managers seemed to be defrauding the company and using the money to pay for a number of questionable services, from adult entertainment to sending money to a mistress and child in another state. Judging from the audit trail, this had been going on for several years but had not come under scrutiny because the man was quite clever, hiding expenses across different cost centers and projects, never for the same amount, never from the same purchase order, and with payments to different bank accounts. However, because of the length of the scheme, it totaled just under $2 million. I sat there trying to make sense of it all. I was literally blown away by the implications. So let me get this straight, I said to James. For a little over 4 years, he's been defrauding the company to pay for inappropriate services. And for the last 3 years, it looks like he's been paying child support out of company money to a woman and child out of state? James nodded. Quite a story. Wow. I tried not to smile. So much for true love. James snorted. A month later, we gave Kensington the preliminary report but withheld details until the investigation was complete. They were concerned that someone might be cheating them and agreed that they needed to know how deep the corruption went before taking action. We asked for another month of time, and they readily agreed. 2 weeks after that, on a Friday night when I returned home, I found that Rebecca had already let herself in and had arranged a candlelight dinner. She poured me a whiskey and Coke and herself a glass of red wine while we dined on chicken parmesan. I eyed the box that stood between us on the table. It didn't take center stage in the conversation, but Rebecca knew I was thinking about it. As we cleaned up and refilled our drinks, heading into the living room, Rebecca had already dimmed the lights and turned on some quiet music through the Bluetooth speaker. Mike, babe, I just want to say that the last few months have been the best months of my entire life, she told me. I wanted to answer her back in the same way, but she held up her hand. Sorry, I just want to say this, she smiled. I know you were broken when we got together, but in a way I was broken too. As you know, I had some strange experiences in my early love life, and ours is much better than anything I can imagine. But that's because we give ourselves completely to each other. I love spending time with you, and I can't wait until the end of the workday to come home to you. I told you that I've been in love with you since the day we met in your office, and it's true. But I am in love with you, Michael, and I really need you to know that. When you open the box. With those words, Rebecca set her glass aside and handed me the box that had been on the kitchen table during dinner and was now on the coffee table in front of us. She held it out to me but didn't lift her glass, just looked at me expectantly. The box itself was small, about the same size as a jewelry box. It wasn't sealed, and I carefully removed the lid to discover another box inside, but it had an envelope on it. I picked up the envelope and looked at Rebecca. She looked at me nervously but nodded as I unfolded the letter inside. Michael, in this box is the engagement ring you bought last week. I accidentally found it last weekend when I was cleaning and you were in the shower. I really hope you open the box, take out the ring, and ask me to marry me. I love you so much. Sincerely and forever, Rebecca Brown. P.S. Love you. Love you. Love you. I looked again at Rebecca, who had hope written all over her face, and muttered to her, I love you too, as I opened the second box. There, amongst a pile of tissue paper, lay the ring box I had bought. The engagement ring inside was a simple gold ring with a single diamond in a classic setting. I smiled at Rebecca, removing the ring box. I never looked in the ring box, baby, Rebecca told me. I wanted to, but I didn't. I nodded, then got up from the couch and knelt down in front of her. Even though Rebecca had organized this week's earlier than I had planned, she sighed but smiled. Rebecca Brown, from the moment you showed up at my door, you have captivated me. You brought me to life and made me feel alive again. Before you kissed me that first time, I didn't think I'd ever see the sun again. When we first woke up together, you amazed me with your willingness to not only pursue me but to show me how much you wanted to be mine. In all the world, I couldn't imagine a more beautiful woman or a more perfect partner. You always surprise me by pushing my boundaries but never disappoint. I was planning on doing this in a couple weeks at your family barbecue. However, I don't think either of us can wait for this moment. I opened the ring box. Rebecca Beth Brown, will you marry me? Yes, she screamed, and threw her arms around my neck. Yes, yes, yes. As I slipped the ring on her finger, we heard a commotion outside. Rebecca started laughing as car doors slammed. What's going on? I asked. "One more surprise," she said, grinning. The doorbell rang, and I opened it to find Colleen, Rebecca's parents, James and Sherry. "Congratulations!" They all shouted together as I opened the door and gasped in surprise. I felt a pair of arms wrap around my waist. "Sorry, babe. I wanted to celebrate our engagement, so I invited a few people over. Last surprise for the night, I promise." My bride-to-be told me. We ushered everyone inside, and her parents brought 2 bottles of champagne with them. As they handed out the glasses, I tried to feign offense since I had no idea, but I couldn't help but smile. While Rebecca showed the ring to the ladies, I received slaps on the back from my future father-in-law and James. We then sat down as a group and spent the rest of the evening laughing merrily at stories about Rebecca's and my childhoods. Later that evening, when everyone had left, Rebecca and I headed to bed, but before she went to sleep, she made me take a few more pictures of her engagement ring. About a month later, 3 events happened within 48 hours of each other. The first was that we delivered the completed forensic report to Kensington. When they read the report, they were not happy at all. Heads would roll, and the authorities would probably have to be contacted. I tried not to get too excited when handing over the report. The Kensington management didn't know I had anything against the main participant in the fraud. The second thing happened the same day. Rebecca took time off work and came to my office with documents, wedding ideas, and just to please all the staff. It was while reading the legal documents she placed in front of me that I first became upset with my bride-to-be. "Rebecca, you've got to be kidding me with this document," I told her, getting more and more upset as I read. "Well, baby, it should bring you a lot of peace of mind about our upcoming marriage. You'll be protected. Your home, your business, everything." "I know, Rebecca, but it's not fair to you. This prenup leaves you with almost nothing." "No, it doesn't. It only leaves me with nothing if I cheat on you, which I will never do," she replied. "In all other cases, the marital estate is split in half, and your business and trusts remain safe." "Rebecca, baby," I said, "I know you're just trying to show me how much you love me because of what Catherine did to me, but the protections I already have are enough." Rebecca held up a hand. "I know, Mike. Believe me, I know," she told me, holding my hands. "But this is my promise to you. I will only walk away with nothing if I cheat on you. Like I told you before, that will never happen." I took the pen and signed the document. "I will trust you, Rebecca." "I know, baby. Trust me, we'll put this in a drawer and never need it." We spent the rest of the day discussing this document several times. In the end, however, she was right, and the document went to the file cabinet drawer to collect dust. The third incident occurred the next evening at home. I had just gotten home, and Rebecca, who had moved in permanently, sent me to the shower. I was just coming out when I heard screaming. Throwing on my shorts, I hurried toward the front door. So I move out and he moves in with some woman. I heard my ex-wife yelling at my fiancé. "Honey, you just walked out the door. You left the most loving and kindest man on this planet, breaking his heart, and I'm not wearing makeup?" Rebecca replied, using her fingers for quotation marks. I lingered in the hallway to avoid being seen. "But yes, I agree with that. However, I am Michael's partner. He receives my love exclusively. Can you say the same when you were married to him?" My fiancé said back to Catherine. "Why, you little?" I heard Catherine shout, and a moment later there was the resounding sound of a slap that I took that as my cue, hurrying the rest of the way into the room. Both women turned to me as one, though Catherine stood covering the red mark on her cheek with her hand. I chuckled. "Rebecca," I said with a smile on my face. "Meet Catherine, my ex-wife. Catherine, meet Rebecca, my fiancée." Both women stared at each other and then separated as I stepped between them. "Do you find this amusing, Mike?" asked Catherine. "Actually," I said, pausing, "yeah, since you weren't invited and started yelling at my fiancé before you got slapped. I find it funny." Perhaps it's a little karma for the way our previous life together ended. Rebecca grinned at Catherine, but I held out my hand. That's enough, Rebecca. She stepped back, continuing to stare at my ex. What do you want, Catherine? I said, sighing. Why did you do it, Mike? Why did you have to ruin my life? She asked, turning some of her anger on me. What do you mean, Catherine? I replied innocently. I've had nothing to do with you for almost a year now. As far as I can remember, you're the one who tried to ruin my life. You left me for true love and damned the consequences. Behind me, Rebecca snorted. Catherine threw an angry glance at Rebecca, then at me. You didn't have to go off and destroy Tyler, she said with a mournful note in her voice. I laughed, causing Catherine to go slightly pale. You're going to have to be a little more specific, Catherine, I told her, crossing my arms over my chest. Rebecca automatically put her arm around my shoulders. It was Harrison Accounting that did the forensic audit of Kensington. It was your report that got Tyler arrested. You didn't have to do that, said Catherine, her voice softer. What? I shouldn't report to the company I'm auditing that one of its employees defrauded them of just over $2 million that was spent on adult entertainment and a woman and child in another state. I asked my ex-wife rhetorically. Adult entertainment? Said Catherine, turning white. A woman and a child? Obviously, whatever truth Catherine had been told, it lacked substantial detail. I leaned forward. Yes, Catherine. The true love you left me for has a woman and child out of state. On top of that, he stole company money to pay for it. It's all in the report. I can send it to you if you'd like. She sank to the ground, and the world around her collapsed. For the first time since this all started, I saw that she was lost. Everything she had told herself about her life was crumbling. Rebecca and I watched as she slumped to the ground on the porch. He got arrested, you know, Catherine told us, the anger from before gone and the grief in her voice now sounding hollowed. I didn't know Tyler had been arrested, but I suspected the authorities wouldn't want to talk to him anytime soon. We've been married less than 3 months, and he spent a month of that out of state, Catherine told us as we watched. Catherine began to sob. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel sorry for her. After all, I'd been married to her for years. I'd held her body in moments of passion. We talked for hours and shared dreams. Yes, I sympathized with her, but at the same time, she was also my tormentor. Cruelly and heartlessly, without a second thought, she discarded me. I'm a kind man, but when it came to Catherine, I couldn't be so kind anymore. What should I do, Mike? Asked Catherine, looking at Rebecca and me. Rebecca answered for me. You have the nerve to ask him that after what you did to him? Rebecca said firmly but surprisingly without venom. Some of the fire returned to Catherine. He was mine long before he was yours, Catherine replied. Rebecca laughed and hugged me tightly again. He was never truly yours, Catherine. You never really let him into your heart. You never gave yourself to him 100%. You must have always kept a part of yourself away from him to do what you did to him. That's not true, Catherine protested, shaking her head and looking at me. I just stood as still as a statue, watching the conversation unfold. I gave myself completely to Mike when we got married, Catherine said. Rebecca laughed. Of course you did. That's why as soon as your true love returned, you started sleeping with him behind your husband's back. That's why you humiliated him in front of a group of people and tried to take away his house, investments, and even his business. Isn't that right? I mean, that's giving yourself completely to Mike. For a moment, Catherine was silent. If a person could become transparent and disappear, I had a feeling it was happening right in front of our eyes. It finally came to me what Catherine had done, what she had given up. Rebecca's hands left my side, and she came over and sat down next to Catherine, showing surprising compassion. Catherine, Rebecca said softly, you don't know my story. When I first met Mike, I wasn't at my best. He was happily married to you at the time, and I realized how much he loved you from the brief conversations I had with him. As time went on, I learned more about him, and I have to admit, I was jealous of you. Catherine looked up, a look of surprise on her face. Rebecca continued, and I leaned against the doorway, crossing my arms over my chest. When I heard what you did to him, I was furious. Catherine nodded slowly. She lowered her head, staring at the concrete of the porch. But then, Rebecca said, looking up at me and smiling, I was at a barbecue for Mike that weekend when the divorce between the two of you became final. Catherine looked up at me, something akin to pain reflected in her eyes. I remained calm, wondering where Rebecca would take the conversation. He was devastated. Even Aunt Colleen had a hard time getting through to him. Catherine glanced quickly at Rebecca, startled by such a revelation. Rebecca continued, Yes, Colleen is my aunt. Anyway, Mike was broken. You left him ruined. Your marriage was over, and he was in danger of sinking into depression or worse. Gone was the kind and gentle man who comforted me a couple years ago. My heart broke for him. Both women looked at me, Rebecca with adoration, Catherine with sorrow. Throughout the evening, although Mike didn't see it, everyone spent time comforting him. He cried openly in front of all of us, not hiding his pain from what you had done to him. He was vulnerable. I think almost everyone at the barbecue hugged him that night, including me. Rebecca smiled at me again. Catherine pulled her knees up to her chest and wrapped her arms around her legs, continuing to look at me while Rebecca told her story. After I hugged Mike, he doesn't remember it, but he told me thank you. In that moment, I realized I could help him. I knew I had a chance to stop his slide into bitterness. I knew that the spark of desire in my own heart to give myself to Mike could be built on the ruins of what you left behind. For a moment, no one said anything. The next week, I came here, and when he opened the door, Rebecca said, a smirk on her face that mirrored my own, I kissed him. Then I slapped him. Catherine's eyes widened, and she looked at Rebecca, then at me. Rebecca and I smiled at each other as we recalled the memory. It was like that, Catherine, Rebecca continued her story. From that moment on, I belonged to him entirely. There will never be another man in my heart, another person I will love as much as Mike. Just thinking about what you did to him makes me physically sick. You threw away a man who could have given you the whole world, and for that alone I thank you. My heart and soul belong to him now, and if you hadn't thrown him away, I never would have had a chance. Again, no one said anything, each of us immersed in our own thoughts, pondering how we had gotten to this point. What am I supposed to do now? She asked. I gave up everything for a dream. Rebecca shrugged. Honestly, I don't care what you do, Catherine. Catherine looked at her in surprise. I'm just letting you know that you've lost your chance, and that I won't allow you back into my man's life. He's mine and he's happy now. I hope you can respect that. Rebecca stood up and walked over to me. I found my voice. Catherine, my ex looked at me. Rebecca is right. She belongs to me, and I belong to her entirely. We will get married, have children, and hopefully love until the day we die. Rebecca is also right about love. For my part, I don't love you anymore. I remember that I once loved you, but after your betrayal and Rebecca coming into my life, there is no love left in me for you. If Catherine could look any more broken, I don't know what she'd look like. And to be honest, I said, I don't really like you. You've hurt me in a way that no one has before, and no one else will ever again. But I have a memory of love, so I'll give you some advice. Catherine, divorce Tyler. Leave him now before things get worse. He'll go to jail for a long time for what he did. Where am I going to go? She asked. I shrugged. I don't care. Maybe Robert and Jessica will let you stay with them. Getting a divorce, Catherine said sadly. I snorted, not really surprised. As you know, a cheating spouse will do that to you. Look, Catherine, you have to figure this out for yourself. I'm not going to be there for you. I'm not your friend. We're just two people who had something once. Is that really how you feel? That we have no chance of being friends? Asked Catherine hopefully. No, Rebecca and I answered in unison. With those words, Catherine stood up and shook her head sadly. She looked at Rebecca and me standing hand in hand. Catherine sighed. Thank you for your honesty. I really wish we could still be friends. I had hoped for that at the beginning of all this, but now I see it was all a dream. She stopped again and shook her head. Thank you. No one else has been honest with me. Take care of each other. I hope you have a happy life together. With those words, she walked to her car, got in, gave us both a mournful look, and drove away. Over the next month, more and more details about Tyler's arrest appeared in the press. Our audit that uncovered the fraud was in the news, and eventually, by the end of the year, we had to nearly double our staff due to the demand for our services. Rebecca and I were married in a small ceremony among friends and family. We went on our honeymoon to Mackinac Island in Michigan, spending a luxurious 2 weeks exploring the beautiful Great Lakes region. When we returned, we got into a rhythm of work, love, and dreaming of the future. We started talking about kids. Rebecca agreed that she wouldn't take birth control, and we would see what would happen. 9 months later, Sarah was born. Just under 2 years after that came twins, Henry and Peter, and last-born was our baby girl, Bridget. After Bridget was born, Rebecca and I decided that 4 was enough, and I went in for surgery. In the years that followed, our lives were rich and fruitful in ways I could never have imagined. Sure, we had the usual family problems, quarrels, and the like, but there was a lot of love in our home, and it never waned over the years. 28 years later, it was a crisp winter morning when the kids and I laid Rebecca to rest. Her battle with cancer had only lasted 2 years. Until the very end, Rebecca gave the kids and me everything she had. I was 57 years old, and Rebecca had just turned 53 when the cancer took her. Even in her weakened state, we often lay together as husband and wife, and Rebecca told me she needed to feel her husband's love. Baby, Rebecca said, even under the influence of the medication but remaining alert, we're going to be okay, you know that. I'm not going to leave you alone. I held her close. I know we'll only be apart for a short time, I told her, stroking her now graying blonde hair. Rebecca smiled. Remember that winter storm in Michigan? She said, and we both smiled, remembering how I had gotten stuck in a blizzard just an hour away from the cabin where Rebecca was waiting for me. For nearly 3 days, we'd only communicated via phone. Yeah, I replied, and we both smiled. Are you going to miss me? She asked, as if you need to ask. You know I'll miss you with all my soul, I replied. We lay together, and words were not needed. After a while, she grabbed my hand, squeezing tightly. I'm scared, baby, Rebecca told me. She was crying quietly. I know there's not much time left. I can feel my body shutting down. Her tears hit my chest at the same time I felt myself trying to be strong for her. Then she did something that almost took my breath away. She sat up in bed, and for a moment all the years seemed to vanish. In my arms was my bride from our first kiss. Not a wrinkle on her face, not cancer eating away at her body. We were young and vibrant. Her eyes were bright, and the love she had for me almost overwhelmed me. I froze in place, holding her close, closing my eyes and feeling my tears as she drifted away. I cried, feeling like a part of myself was lost forever. My family surrounded me and we cried openly. Rebecca, my wife, the mother of all my 4 children, was my true love, my soulmate, and I knew I would never be the same without her in my life. But I was also happy she was no longer in pain from the ravages of cancer. After that, I knew that even if she wasn't with me, I would have daily reminders of our life together. We had our children, and almost every weekend one of them would be by my side, or I would visit them. James and Sherry and their children were often around too. No one let me be lonely. As the months passed after Rebecca's death, I rejoiced in my family, rejoiced in my friends. At night, if I was lonely, I had so many pictures and videos of our time together that I always went to bed with a smile. Often I would picture her next to me, content that we had loved each other completely. About 6 months after Rebecca's death, I was enjoying coffee on a Saturday morning at our local coffee shop when a shadow swept over me and stopped. "Michael," spoke a voice I hadn't heard in over 28 years. "Catherine?" I replied, recognizing her as an older version of the woman I once loved. I don't know why, but I gestured to a seat on the other side of the table. "Would you care to join me?" I asked. She hesitated for a moment before nodding her head and sitting down. As I studied her, I noted the lines on her face, the tired look, the age spots on her arms, and her thin frame. I hadn't followed her life too closely since that evening on my front porch, but from what I knew, it hadn't been easy. She looked older than her 54 years. "How are you doing?" I asked conversationally. "Oh, as I get older, my body doesn't react the way it used to. When I try to get up in the morning, I wonder if I should just lie in bed. That way it won't hurt as much," she told me. I laughed. I could understand that. Catherine smiled, but then got a little sadder. "I heard that Rebecca died." "I'm sorry, Michael," she said with genuine regret, which surprised me. "Thank you," I said to my ex-wife. "I miss her terribly, but she's always in my heart and still in my thoughts every day," I replied, smiling as I remembered how Rebecca and I had sat at this very table several times over the years. "The kids don't give me a moment's peace now that Rebecca's gone. They're determined to make sure I'm always active and that someone looks after their aging father," I said, sighing. Catherine smiled for a moment, then lost the smile again and just looked sad. "Do you have kids?" I asked. She shook her head, looking down at her coffee. "I've never had children," Catherine told me. "I was married 4 more times after Tyler went to prison. Each time I thought I'd found something real, but..." She trailed off. I kept comparing everyone to what I thought we had, or what I thought I had with Tyler. It took me years to realize that what I was chasing was just a fantasy. There was a weary note in her voice. "I really made a mess of things, didn't I, Michael?" she asked, and then held up her hand. "I know I did. It took Tyler's arrest for me to see what he really was, and by then it was too late to undo the damage I'd done to you." I reflected on the woman sitting in front of me. To be honest, I'd hated her for a long time, longer than I'd been angry at her. But now I saw a broken, sad woman who had never been in a real relationship, not one where there was enough love or trust to produce a child. "Catherine?" I said, catching my breath, and she looked at me with the same hope in her eyes that I'd seen all those years ago. "I think you need to forgive yourself. 5 marriages, they must not have all been disasters. Surely a couple of them were okay." For a moment her eyes lost focus, a memory flashing through her mind that I couldn't see. "You're right. My 3rd husband, Barry, was a kind and gentle man. And you're also right, after that night with you and Rebecca, and especially after Tyler was arrested and I learned the truth about what he'd been doing, I started questioning everything. I wanted to be loved, but I never dealt with the guilt over what I did to you." She looked at me. "I know I've said this before, but I'm sorry for what I did to you, Michael." "Thank you, Catherine. I accept your apology," I replied. We both smiled. We spent the next few hours talking. I told her about Rebecca's life, the kids, and our lives. Catherine told me about her hobbies and some of the activities she was doing these days in retirement after working for over 25 years for the local government in an administrative position. "Michael, you don't think that?" she asked uncertainly as we got up from the table to go our separate ways. That I smiled and shook my head. "No, I'm sorry, Catherine. I love my wife too much." "Michael, I know you loved Rebecca, but she's gone," Catherine said hopefully. "Of course there's something wrong with that." I held up my hand. Catherine, Rebecca, and I were only separated for a short time. My love for her burns as brightly today as it did the day we met. I cannot and will not betray her memory. My words hit something deep inside my ex-wife, a real pain and realization of what she had lost. She nodded slowly. Friends then? She asked. We'll see, Catherine. We'll see, I replied. And with that, I knew I had finally found peace. I would continue living in the house Rebecca and I had shared, surrounded by the memories of our beautiful life together, close to our children and grandchildren. I had forgiven Catherine not for her sake, but for my own. The anger that had once consumed me was gone, replaced by gratitude for the love I had known and the family I had built. In the evenings, I would sit in our garden, watching the sunset, remembering all the wonderful moments we had shared, and feeling grateful for every day we had been given together. This was how I would live the rest of my days, in love, in memory, and in peace. Thank you for your viewing. See you next time. If you enjoyed this, subscribe to JK Tells a Story for more tales.